Well, guys, I want to welcome you to Overtime, which is where we take Sunday's message further and deeper. And I am so excited about this new series that we kicked off this last Sunday called Brick by Brick, where we're talking about how all of us can take a step, a very practical step in our influence, a practical step in our leadership, and experience something I think we all want, which is strengthen our marriage and strengthen our relationships and, endurance when it comes to our faith, when it comes to our career, when it comes to our legacy, just overall, just a better place in life. And so this week we started this whole message series with our first brick, which is to say intelligent, sensible leaders, they find their why. So their why behind what in terms of what they want a better marriage, what they want with their finances, what they want with their faith. It's you've got to find your why. Great leaders find the why behind everything because why gives clarity, why allows you to say yes and to no to the right things and to the wrong things, and why ultimately gives you the highest probability to discover the what. So we talked about all of that on Sunday, so much more. So if you haven't listened to that, make sure and listen. And today we're taking this conversation further, and I'm so excited to talk with a person who has found their why, who's one of the greatest leaders I'm aware of. And we've talked about whys for like a decade. And so I want to introduce Tracy Hooper. So Tracy, welcome.
Thank you.
And can you tell us a little bit about you and your involvement here at North Point and just like who you are?
Sure. I am a doctor, and I currently serve as the Chief Medical Information Officer for a large organization that takes care of 100,000 of our neighbors in Texas who don't have health insurance. I'm married to my husband, Mick. We've been married for 20 years. We have 2 kids, age 14 and 15, and we've been at North Point since the very first service. But I think, interestingly, we had been out of church for 20 years before we found North Point, and North Point has been a really important partner in our life in helping us grow our marriage and our parenting. I also am the director of Mosaic, which is North Point's global engagement ministry, where we are involved with a church in Kenya that has an orphan care home on the property, and our ministry is all around orphan care.
Yeah, which is awesome. Yes, and what's so cool is, as you mentioned, I mean, I remember the first Sunday, and you know what's wild to think about? I remember standing up in Parkside Elementary on our kind of makeshift stage that had like creaky areas. You were like, I'm not going to fall through the stage. And then I remember the first Sunday seeing you. I remember that.
You do?
Like, it's like, hey, tell me about that first Sunday at North Point. I remember looking out and seeing you and Mick. And thinking about your story and that you guys, just where you were with faith and church. And I remember the first message, the bottom line was Jesus liked people who were nothing like him, and people were nothing like Jesus liked him. And like, what if we created a church which is very much like that? And I was looking at you guys. And so it's really cool to like fast forward 12 years later, and we've been, to Kenya together and experienced so many ups and downs, through the years with North Point. And then here we are talking about the why. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, on the other side of you, obviously, it takes a lot of work and effort and determination and overcoming obstacles to become a doctor. And in addition to that, you organizationally, pretty much whatever organization you go to, you have a tendency to rise to a place of influence and a place of leadership. And I've been so grateful to be on the other side of you because so many ideas I have are kind of in the cloud ideas, and you're like, come down off the clouds and like, let's talk about this practically. And you have been really helpful, and you've been a phenomenal leader to be on the other side. Like, the passage in the Bible is iron sharpens iron. You have sharpened me for over the last 12 years. So I'm just curious, as a leader, being in lots of organizations, lots of accomplishments in life, like what would you say are some of your greatest leadership lessons that you've learned?
I think probably one of the big ones that I try to live by, and maybe now so more than when I was a lot younger, you learn these things through the years.
It's crazy how that works.
Is always be training up your replacement. I think it's critical for a leader to really pour in to the individuals, to your direct reports underneath you, and really understand each one of them individually and what is their motivation, why are they here, if they're not doing well, is it what's holding them back? Because if it's a skill thing, almost anybody can learn almost anything. It's more when it's not a skill thing and somebody's not fitting. There's one aspect of coaching, which is helping people rise and knowing what their career goal is and helping them get to that next step, even if that's not with your organization. And that's super important for me,
right.
Especially mentoring other women who are younger than me. But sometimes that's also coaching somebody out of a position. And that's changed a lot through the years. One of my faults is impatience, and I used to be kind of quick to fire people. And now I have conversations with them to figure out their real motivations, and if they're not working out, why is that? And really helping opening their eyes. And, it's not like a light bulb moment for them. Usually most of those people know it's not a good fit, but you're giving them the freedom to speak about it. And it's less scary for them because I truly help manage them out of where they are now and into a position that is a better fit for them.
Yeah.
And it's an uncomfortable conversation in the beginning, and it's a series of conversations, but most of those people come back after they've left our organization and are very thankful because they needed that push. They were stuck.
Well, and I think just from a mentor perspective, if it's mentor versus, you always can feel a leader that has an agenda. So I'm coaching you for my agenda to accomplish my purposes versus, somebody who's up front, hey, together, here's what we want to accomplish. So there's no like sneaky stuff, but then also a genuine interest in your life.
Right.
Like when there's that, like, hey, tell me about what's going on and tell me about what's happening. And there's a genuine interest to go, your life is valuable. I want to find out if you're really a good fit, not for my purposes solely, but I really have a genuine interest in your life. Like so many people thrive under that, you know, have such a respect and like, man, okay. Like Tracy, thanks for like, you've asked questions no one's asked, which is is awesome leadership.
Yep.
So that's a good one.
You do that too. When we have our one-on-ones, you always take the time to ask what's going on in my life, even outside of my ministry role here, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I try, but I'm really convinced if you're not doing well, like personally, if there are things, that's just going to come through.
Yeah.
And leading people, this is like, I just think we're leading people in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, which just feels like really, really important, and we can't play with people. Yeah. So I know, like, man, if I'm not doing well or you're not doing well or our staff isn't doing well, like, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
Because I think the better, you can grow and personally develop, then, you'll lead people more effectively, and we just can't play.
Yeah. Coaching and mentoring is huge. I have another business principle, and I wrap it up into the phrase, walk toward the fear, but what it really means is continuing to grow. And I think a lot of good leaders are always continuing to grow, and I think one of the areas they're always looking into is, and importantly is looking into how do I grow in emotional intelligence? How do I coach people better, mentor people better? And that's important, and you have to do that, but you have to keep growing in what were you first hired for anyway? Like, what is your job? Coaching people is a derivative of your job because you're always going to have direct reports, but what is your career and how are you continuing to learn and to grow? Because I think once you get to the point where you're an expert, like this is easy, I can do this in my sleep, it becomes really comfortable. And I just say be relentlessly suspicious of the comfortableness because it feels like I've reached the height. This is awesome. I'm going to coast, and just know that's the beginning of the down. Like that's the beginning of the death knell.
Yeah.
You become too comfortable, so it becomes harder and scarier to think about leaving that job or that company. So you become less innovative. You don't push the envelope. You don't do the things that scare you. So I wrap that all up and walk towards the fear.
I love that phrase. I love it. Red flag for me, like in terms of leadership, and I'll listen to this. If somebody says, I've been there, done that. I've done that my whole like one of the things inside of me, I flinch at that every time because I'm like, well, then you're not curious anymore. Right. Like you've lost your curiosity. Like there may be a nuance. I know what they're saying, and I totally respect that. Like I have been through this before. I've seen so many elements, but there's something about that to go. But maybe there's a different nuance. Maybe there's a different angle. Maybe God is doing something different to teach us something more, to kind of progress us or to push us, or church term, sanctify us. Grow us.
Right.
And so I love But that my personality would be that way. Let's go towards the fire, Tracy.
Yes, I'm there with you. Let's do it.
I know.
I've had a personal philosophy that you should leave your employer every 5 years and your industry every 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I'm not leaving North Point.
Yeah. I'm like, what does that mean?
The places that I've stayed longer than that are places where I get to continue to evolve and grow, and my position today is extremely different than it was, a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, culturally, if that's the culture, like culturally the organization is, hey, let's walk towards our fear. Let's let's innovate. Let's create. Like, we know there's a wave, and that wave's going to end. So is this the inflection? Is this a time to move and all that good stuff?
Right.
As you were saying that, there's a book for listeners who maybe want to take that discussion a little bit further in terms of like the cycles of organizational cycles that I was telling you about that I recently read, and our leadership team is starting to read. It's called Predictable Success by Les Miles. That's the coach. Les McGowan, I think. And so it's a great book that just talks about this cycle. And one of the cycles they say is once you get to predictable success, which is really hard to get to organizationally, there is a comfort, there is a broader, like there's a longer runway, there's more lanes in that road, so it feels like, I can breathe. But the danger is that apathy begins to grow, and then before long is what he calls the death rattle. And that's where like you're dying, but you organizationally sometimes you don't know it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, good stuff. Well, thanks for sharing those, because you've seen a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So part of the reason I ask you to come on is not only because of your leadership, but you, on the other side of you and Mick, you guys have found your why. I don't think like all whys in life you found, but you have found some pretty big whys, and it's been cool to experience that because like there's a passion behind you. There's like you were talking about, like, hey, I'm not going to get comfortable. We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to keep discovering together, and we're going to stay curious together. And so much of that, I think, is because like I hear you talk about your why. I've seen you talk about your why. And so one of your big whys I know is when it comes to children. And there's a story behind Chance and Ty, and there's a video even about you guys. And so, can you tell us about discovering your why and a little bit more context of that?
Sure. 15 years ago, Mick and I decided we were ready to start trying to have a family, and had just a lot of difficulties with infertility. And so started looking for, I'm a fixer, a doer, right? So, okay, what's the next step? So had all the options laid out on a spreadsheet, seriously.
Yes, I can see that.
And ultimately, we ended up in China to adopt a child. And I think it's important to know at that point, I didn't know anything about the international orphan crisis. I wasn't looking to save an orphan or anything like that. Mm-hmm. This was a selfish motivation. I wanted a child. I wanted to build a family. This was a means to an end. This is why I was in China. Mm-hmm. But when we were in China adopting our daughter, we had the opportunity to visit her orphanage. And so we thought about whether we wanted to do that. We thought, let's get some pictures, just kind of help document her story for her. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting a small, like, family kind of environment with lots of grannies there taking care of the kids or something. I don't know. But we got on a bus, and when the doors, the gates opened and we drove into the parking lot, we were looking at a 6 or 7 story building that was an orphanage. And there's hundreds of these in China. Every floor, every room filled with children. And I'm emotional just thinking about it right now because I was crushed. It was the first time I had seen the other side of my whole journey. It was the child's side of the journey, and I was crushed and forever changed. And it happened in that moment. It grew and it became more nuanced, over time. I think part of the rest of the story because I came back and said, Buck, we have to start a ministry about orphan care. Oh, yeah. And North Point was only a couple months old at that time. And you didn't say no. You said, wait well. We're a little too young and early, but wait well and sort of investigate the options and what would this ministry look like, what would we be trying to tackle. And that's what I did for the next year. And then we founded the ministry when North Point was 1 year old. It's been going strong for almost 11 years now with our partnership in Kenya.
So amazing. Yeah. So that's interesting. So more or less you and Mick didn't sit down and go like, hey, here's our why. You kind of bumped into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, is that the video that you have that I think there are some parts of it that are not legal or something like this, or maybe
there might be some video in an orphanage that was illegal.
Something like this. But there was a moment I remember, I think it was with Chance, where you wrapped her up. And it was was that the first time you saw her? And it was like magic. It was one of those, where it's like, hey, a picture, I forget the phrase, like 1,000, like a video can be like 1,000,000 words. Yeah. And it was a 1,000,000 word moment. Yeah. And I was like, that is so surreal. Yeah. That was so fun to watch. Well, and then, that ignited a little bit of a why. You bumped into something that was already there. But it certainly, fired that up, and I was on the other side of that many times in conversations, and you're fairly persistent. You're a driven leader, which I love. And so, over the years, it's been a lot of fun to see the difference it's made in lots of kiddos' lives, the difference it's made in families' lives, the difference it's made in so many of our students and so many adults who've traveled to Kenya. And I've been on a few of those trips with you, and it's so cool. It's so cool to see that. So, one of the things I said on Sunday in terms of the why is it provides clarity. And I think in life, one of the coolest things to have is clarity, to go like, I'm going to say yes to that. I'm going to say no to that. I can see how that could undermine my why. And so I would imagine over the years it's provided you clarity of what to say yes to, what to say no to as a result of your why. So can you talk to that a little bit and how it, finding your why has provided clarity?
Yeah. Sure. I think that moment in the orphanage when I found my why, and it's about I believe children should have a home, should have a family with safety and with love, and that was my driving thing. Mm-hmm. There's the business side of me that was a little uncomfortable in the first couple years of the ministry, and that I wanted to dream bigger, and you pushed me to a lot of that too. Mm-hmm. We push each other a lot.
Sure.
Is like, hey, we're taking care of 30 kids in this home, but how do we get to 1,000? How do we get to 10,000 kids? I had some issues with that early on, that it was like, how do I get there, and do I want that? And I don't feel that way anymore. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's just the number of years in ministry and just seeing, what's practical and what can you do with the resources you have. But I also think it's that I'm sort of in that second half of life phase right now, mm-hmm. where in the first half, for me, it like the peak was age 50 is where I start, just perspective changed. Mm-hmm. Before that, there's always a future. There's always like, oh, we'll get that done in the future. Yeah. When you hit whatever peak, whatever age that is for you, and you start to see the other side of it, and time becomes so precious, and you really do start to think more legacy, like, mm-hmm. how do I want to leave this world, compared to when I came in? And it's no longer big in numbers anymore for me like it was. Now it's like, when I'm gone, I want there to be a handful of people who mm-hmm. I made a tremendous impact. I changed the trajectory of their life in mm-hmm. what I did. And with those 30 kids, I know them by name. I know what each one of them wants to do, in their career. I am, through Mosaic, making sure that each one of them gets the education that they need, so that they become self-sufficient and independent, and they become the movers and shakers, mm-hmm. I am making a tremendous difference in those lives, and that's enough for me. Yeah. So what do I say no to is when you come to me and say, can we go, expand into another country? Yeah. So Kenya plus something else.
Plus
and
the 25
I'm like,
others.
Not now.
Yeah.
Maybe when there's a lot of resources, but right now we have committed for decades to each one of these children. Mm-hmm. We're not coming in and dropping off 10,000 pair of shoes.
Right.
We're committing to the life of these couple dozen kiddos, and that's expensive, and so there to a family environment that there are mom and dad like caretakers for mm-hmm. them, and that they all can go to school and get the medical care and everything that they need. So that makes it easy for me to know what to say yes and no to.
Yeah, it does. And, as you were talking, I thought, like you were saying, hey, I'm going to go, not super wide, but deep with these, a few. And I was thinking, that's like Jesus right there. And of course, I'm the preacher, so I'm going to say this. Yeah, let me bring Jesus into the moment. But that's exactly what he did. He, found some individuals. He went very deep with these 12 guys. Mm-hmm. And the reality is one of the guys is like, hey, Judas, he couldn't lead everybody. There was a freedom aspect in that. Mm-hmm. But ultimately he said, hey, let's kind of see if we can find some synergy and unity around the why. And I'm going to pour into you, and then you go and make disciples of all nations. The things I've taught you, now you begin to teach. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that kind of model, if you will.
Watching the ripple effect in people you've poured into is the deepest, most satisfying thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. See, so I think you're onto something because Jesus did it. So, yeah, see, so we can still accomplish both like, purposes or intentions. Like, I'm like, hey, Tracy, listen, 25,000. And part of that is my wiring. And the other part of that is like, every time we talk about numbers, and we're big numbers people here at North Point, And we're always thinking about numbers. And because every number represents a life, every number represents a story of, those 6-story buildings in China. I mean, every number represents something. And I just feel the mandate to go change, to go like, hey, why don't I give my life for this? Because people are so incredibly valuable. And so I love the idea, behind the numbers, but I also think it's really important to be wise in how we do that. The process and the why gives some insight into the process. So
yeah,
love that. So in terms of, just, motivation and in terms of being able to discern, the why, I'm just curious, just on the practical side of leadership. I think, there's the why in marriage, there's the why in business, there's the why in our finance, all the things I was talking about on Sunday. In terms of just really practical leadership, so people listening in, all different aspects of life, like how would you lean into what you've learned about the why, how important it is, and just give some practical advice in this discussion?
I think I was telling you earlier, I sometimes cringe a little inside when we tell people like, go find your why, go find what breaks your heart. Mm-hmm. Because in my 15-year journey of just, growth, self-improvement, that sort of thing, I feel like I spent so much time trying to figure out what's my purpose, why am I here, what's my legacy going to be, what is my big dream, and it really led to a lot of angst and desperate searching and feeling what the heck is wrong with me, why don't I know what my dream is. And my big dream, about the orphans, it hit me on the head, it came to me. I was not searching for it. And so I do think that when there's different levels of whys, right, and so the big earth-shattering, this shook me to the core about orphans, I could not live the rest of my life without doing something about it. That might happen to you, and that might be, probably will be, because of something awful, that some big trial you've gone through in life. I think about people who've lost relatives to drunk drivers, or they're raising a child with medical special needs, or they've recovered from addiction or abuse or the foster system. Some intense trial you've gone through might become your why. I mean, you may become the world's best advocate for leading those who come behind you who are going through that same thing. So life might give you a why, but there shouldn't be this feeling of desperation, I don't know what my why is, and I don't want something horrible like that to happen to me. But just living your regular life, it's where are the areas that bother you? What is it about my job, my marriage, my parenting, that sort of thing, where I do feel a little bit of this isn't what it could be. You can find smaller, less earth-shattering, whys that if you really dig deep and you really uncover what it is that you want, the way you want your life to go, it doesn't have to be this desperate searching, but you can manifest, your destiny, what you want your life to be. But it's like you said on Sunday, you have to keep asking why. And then whenever you answer that question, why, go deeper. And when you run out of whys, you do come to the deep thing that really will move you. And it doesn't have to be saving orphans or, something like that. Whatever you do to change your life in that way, you are affecting the people around you. You are making a difference in the world. Don't think small is bad.
Well, I love that, because I think it's really easy to get caught up in the anxiety piece of that, is to go I have to find my big why. And it's the small whys that can often lead to the big why. And it's like you were saying, it's almost like destiny. It's almost like, in the sovereignty of God, he has this big why for you. And it's but you have to be faithful with the little whys to find the big why. And I think that's really important, because you can walk around feeling a little bit defeated and feeling why did they have their why and I don't have my why, and why does she and he and they, all that kind of stuff.
Right. When
the reality is what you're doing today will get you potentially to the big why.
Right.
There's a really implicit level of trust to God to go, okay. I'm curious about this. So this Sunday, I was talking about, kind of really directing it to the small whys. So it's hey, whatever it is, it's if you're married, well, there's a why. That's a pretty big why, so I wouldn't call that a small why. But in your career, what do you want to do and why? In your health, what do you want to do and why? All this stuff. So there's a why. There's a lot of small whys that lead to the big why. And I'm curious, are there resources, or how would you advise somebody to go about like finding all these whys? Like, what has been helpful for you? And I'm thinking like in terms of like, mentor relationships, like you mentioned earlier, maybe books, like just some things that, if people are stuck in finding their why, like they've gotten maybe 2 whys down, but there's one more why. Is there anything that comes to your mind, like just pops in your mind to go like, man, this has been helpful to find some of the smaller whys to get to a bigger why?
For me personally, mentoring and coaching is huge, has changed everything. I read a lot of books like you do, and sometimes a book will give me a nugget of an idea, but to really apply that honestly to my life, it's like what you said today. You have to get outside of yourself, and I think you need the reflection from somebody else. I think you need to find somebody you can be really honest with, and there's probably somebody in your life. I'm not saying you have to go to paid coaching, or therapy or something like that. But those are good things too. But I think you need to. I think if we keep asking ourselves the why, and you keep saying ask the next why, get deeper and deeper and deeper. It's hard work, right? And we don't tend to want to go toward hard work. And so I think you do need the pushing from somebody else. And that when it gets to the uncomfortable stuff that comes up, somebody needs to keep getting you to talk through that to where you get to the deep part. So coaching, mentoring, something in that realm, I think is key.
Yeah, I totally would agree. I think even like, I reference like books or podcasts or blogs as like mentoring from a distance. Like I don't personally know that person. They're not like vested mentoring in my life, but they wrote the book to do that. Like part of their purpose was to go, man, this is really helpful. So I think even that, all the way around, it's like somebody outside of me helping me discover the thing that I need from me, but ultimately which will get outside of me again, if that makes sense. It's the idea to go like, man, you challenged me via this book. You challenged me via the podcast to go well beyond, hey, the example on Sunday, I want to look good in a bathing suit. Great. But why? And I ultimately gave, I just said, the healthiest gift I could give my children is the healthiest version of me. And for me, that why came from counseling. And, it's like it came from where I was challenged with my dad and, my counselor, I was like, hey, here's what I want to do and all these kind of things. And my counselor kept going, why? And ultimately it came to the place to go, your best probability, which you can't control people, but your best probability to get the outcome, which is the what, is to be the healthiest version of you. So you can respond, you can react, you can be patient, you can show benevolence, you can show grace, unconditional love, because you've done the work yourself. So the healthiest thing you can do for that relationship is to give them the healthiest version of you. And I went, there's a good why.
Yeah.
So oftentimes that's why, relationships and so on.
Yeah. And we're blind to so many things in ourselves. You have to have somebody else that you trust who really knows you, or you develop this coaching relationship through to reflect those things back to you.
That's really. Have you ever done a 360 review?
Yes.
Those are terrible.
They're awful.
Yeah, but that's another why. Like if you, we did a series called Climate Change, where you remember the question, "What's it like on the other side of me?"
Yes,
it's a terrible question to ask. But it's like, it's one of those, oftentimes I'll ask in my one-on-ones, things of that nature. I'll be like, hey, what's it, been like on the other side of me? We call it open time. Like, is there anything I'm doing hurting our trust? Anything I'm doing that, not giving you the tools? And I really don't want an answer to that question. But it does develop, like, if they're like, man, one of the things people say about me is I don't have fun. And I'm like, but work is fun for me. It's fun to whiteboard. It's fun to brainstorm. It's fun to read books. Like, I'm having tons of fun. And they're like, but it helped me.
I get you.
Yeah, see, you and I could have fun. But it's like one of those things that I can't see it, but you can see it. Right. So am I going to benefit from that information, or kind of put my head in the sand a little bit because, I emotionally fear what you're going to say.
Right.
But what you have is so empowering for me to be the healthiest version of me, to go, oh, that's what it's really like on the other side of me. And that drives a lot of whys. Yeah. And have you thought, and we'll wrap up with this, but I just think when it comes to faith, I think one of the questions, like I talked about on Sunday, but you just mentioned, is like the why behind the why behind the why. I think a lot of times we go, I want a deep faith. I want an experientially relevant faith. I want to feel what it feels like to be with my Father, Heavenly Father. I want to feel like this. Man, I feel like so informed. I feel empowered. I feel so close to God. I feel like He's real. I feel like I hear His voice, all these kind of things. And I think that's wonderful, but oftentimes I think the why question is a really helpful question. And I think it's like, well, why do you want to feel that? And it's like, so why is that so important? And ultimately, I think asking the why behind the why behind the why can get you to I believe or I cause state, or, this is my cause, this is my belief purpose, and like really get you in terms of faith, what are foundational. And so like the idea to go, I believe God is real. I believe He's the most plausible answer to all the scientific evidence that's out there. Like, I believe He's real. And then I believe, Jesus is God in a body, Emmanuel, God with us, to show us and to talk to us about who God is. And I believe He's the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus said, I'm the way. I believe that. So when I'm looking for the way of life, I'm looking for truth in life. I'm looking for, what should I do in life? He's the answer to all of that. And I believe every single person has value and worth. So I should, share my faith and, engage with this world the way Jesus called. I just think those statements to like go why behind the why behind the why. Sure, you want to know the Bible well, and sure you want to like, oh man, I feel this really cool empowerment. Like I can give all these like doctrinal theological answers, but why? And so would you add anything to that in terms of just faith and the whys of faith? And
I just think for me, and again, it's the whole personal growth journey and, taking all of the tests that tell you what your personality is like and the Enneagram and all of that. And I know my core driver is that I need to feel in control. I need to not have other people control me. I need control. And so even my decision to accept Christ was not I think some people have okay, I've decided, like, today's the day. For me, it was like a 2-year journey, and it was all about giving up control. And so when I'm in the throes of life, when things are really difficult, it's me leaning into my faith and leaning into Jesus is like, this is my weakness. I know this is a core driver of me, and this sometimes prevents me from being close to you, God. And so the moments that I can feel that surrender to Him are huge and impactful for me and help me grow in my faith because I believe what you said. I believe it's real, and when when it feels most real for me is when I have to surrender control, which is super scary, but is also the times that I feel the closest to God.
That's so good.
Yeah,
it's so good. We'll end with this, but as you were talking, the one thing, and again, I think finding your why is, I think one of the greatest probabilities to do that is exactly what you said. It's on the other side of somebody. And it's on the other side of some sharpening relationship, somebody who loves you enough to, encourage you. There's a proverb that says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. It's that idea to go like, gosh, does somebody love me enough to be able to say something in such a way that's profitable and helpful to build me up, but may feel like a wound initially, but is a benefit long-term. Helps me find the why. And I remember when you talked about control, my counselor one time was asking me like, so why is that so important? And why is that so important? And I'm like, well, then it was about parenting, and then my kids will, be this, and then, and then people, won't follow me. And then, North Point won't be this. And then like just kept going. And then what? And then what? And then what? Like why? And ultimately I got to a place to go, I want to control so much because I don't want to be alone. One of my greatest fears is to be alone.
Yep.
And I was like, and it took so much emotional energy. And I think that's...
And somebody pushing you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the synonymous, it feels synonymous with why. When I shared this Sunday, when I said, my legacy as a man is going to be determined by how well I love my wife and kids. I mean, that took a long time to get to that place to go, because everything in me says, no, it's my accomplishments. No, it's how much money I can make. No, it's how much influence I have. No, it's, how big our church is. And the reality is no. I mean, I've read too many history books and too many biographies and, too many stories of people who've traded everything for something that ultimately is not
fleeting.
Yeah, it's fleeting. And so anyways, I really think I love what you said in terms of it's on the other side of people is really helpful. Anything else you would add to the conversation in terms of the why and the how and the what and leadership and as we start this whole series off?
Nope, I'm good.
Cool. Well, Tracy, thank you for this discussion. Thanks for being willing to come on Overtime.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah. And for all of you guys listening in, I'm super grateful for you. And I really am going to be praying for you and praying that God gives you your why this week and that maybe through relationships, through a book, through a podcast, maybe even through what Tracy and I are talking about, that you can take a step and discover your why, because if you can discover your why, it gives you clarity, gives you motivation, and ultimately puts you in a great position to discover the what and discover that strength and endurance. So that's my hope for all of us. All right, Tracy, thanks again. I'll see you guys next week.